Hey guys, today's video is on factoring trinomials. There are 5 steps when you're factoring trinomials, and I'm going to walk you through them before we try any example. So the first step is to convert your trinomial into standard form. Standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. Step 2 is to, if possible, to factor out your GCF, so your greatest common factor. This is what we did last time in the previous lesson. We were just factoring using greatest common factor. Step 3 is to look for two numbers that multiply to a times c, but also add to b. Okay, so you're going to have to multiply a and c first, and then you're going to have to figure out if those numbers add to b. So those two numbers have to do both. For step 4, you're going to write those numbers as factors here. So you're going to have x and then your number, and then times x and then your other number. Then you're going to divide both numbers by a. If it's not divisible, you're going to move the numbers in front of x, just like I've showed here at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and walk you through some examples. This is your skills practice that you have for homework. It's on page 925 of the chapter 13 skills practice that I attached, so you can follow along if you'd like. For homework, you're doing all of the even problems. By the way, your book says to factor using an area model. I'm not doing that. I feel like it's a lot more work, but if you're a visual person, you can go ahead and look that up and then factor that way if you'd like. Okay, so number 13, we have the trinomial. It's x squared minus x minus 6. It is in standard form, so we're going to go ahead and factor this. All right, so the first thing to do is take your a. There's nothing there, so it's 1, and then multiply it with c. So that's going to give us negative 6. Okay, I've used this model to organize my work, so I want to find two numbers that multiply to negative 6, but I want them to add to the middle number, which is b. Okay, now there isn't a number there, so it's negative 1. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 6 but add to negative 1. All right, so what you could do is write all the factors of 6 or negative 6 and then see which ones work. Okay, so I could do negative 1 times 6. I could do negative 6 times 1. I could do 3 times 2, negative 3 times 2, and then negative 2 times 3. Okay, those are all my factors of negative 6. Now you'll want to pick one of those combinations that adds to negative 1. All right, so if I add the first one together, I get 5. The second one gives me negative 5, so those don't work. The third one gives me negative 1. If I add those together, I get negative 1. And then the last one does not work. That gives me positive 1. So the only combination that works is negative 3 and 2. All right, they multiply to negative 6 but add to negative 1. So the next step is to write them as factors. Okay, so I'm going to write x and then x. Okay, so it's going to be x minus 3 and then x. The second one is going to be plus 2 since it's positive 2. And then with this, you can take your a term. Now, if we look at our a term, it was technically the number 1. So if you divide these by the number 1, that doesn't change anything. Negative 3 divided by 1 is negative 3. 2 divided by 1 is 2. So since nothing changes, whenever your a is 1, you don't have to do that extra step. So my answer is x minus 3, times x plus 2, and that's my final answer. Okay, that's the factored form of that trinomial. All right, let's go ahead and try another one. So number 15, x squared plus 7x plus 10. So again, take your a term, which is just 1 if there's nothing there. Your c term, multiply them, we get 10. Okay, so we want to find two numbers that multiply to 10 but add to the number in the middle. So the number in the middle is 7. All right, so two numbers that multiply to 10 and add to 7. Again, you can write your factors out. So 2 times 5 is 10. Obviously 5 times 2. You don't have to write it 2 different times. I did write it 2 different times for the last problem because the negative changed. And then the only other way we can get 10 is 1 times 10 or 10 times 1. All right, so just by looking at it, I know the first one works. 2 times 5 is 10. It also adds to 7. 1 and 10 doesn't work. Okay, oops, 1 and 10 doesn't work. So here I'm going to write 2, oops, let me change my color to stay consistent. So here I'm going to use 2 and 5. So now I'm going to write my factors. Okay, so the first one's going to be x. Second one's going to also start with x. That's my variable. So take this number, put it in here. So this is x plus 2 because it's positive. Next one goes in there. It's x plus 5. My a was 1, so I don't have to divide by 1. This is my final answer. Okay, you can also check your answer by multiplying this out if you'd like. So just FOIL or distribute. So if I multiply x times x, I get x squared. X times 5 is 5x. 2 times x is 2x, and then 2 times 5 is 10. I can combine the middle terms. So this is x squared plus 7x plus 10, which was the problem that they gave me. So it checks out. Okay, you don't have to do that, but when you're taking a test or a quiz, you can totally check your answer that way. All right, perfect. On the next page, there's going to be more problems for you to keep going. It says to use a box method. You could if you'd like. I don't like it. I feel it's just a lot of extra work, but if you'd like, you can go ahead and use that method. I'm going to move on to number 19. So it's the same thing, only our variable is m. So again, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply. So here's a 1. 1 times -7 is -7. And then the middle number, throw that at the bottom. So two numbers that multiply to -7 but add to 6. Okay. So again, I can look at the factors. So -1 times 7. I could do -7 times 1. I can, and that's it. Okay. So those are the only factors of -7. So the only combination that works for them to add to a +6 would be the first combination. Okay, that would give me a 6. The second one would give me a -6, so that doesn't work. So here I'm going to put -1 and 7. I'm going to copy those over. I'm copying these numbers. And then I'm ready to write my factors. So my factors are going to be x minus 1, and then the other one is going to be x plus 7. Again, I'm just copying these numbers and throwing them in there. All right. My a is 1, so if I divide by 1, it doesn't change anything. So this is my final answer. All right. Let's try 21. That one's different. For this one, it is in standard form, but I can factor out a greatest common factor. Okay, so factor out the GCF. The GCF in this case is 4 because 4, 12, and -40 are all divisible by 4. Okay. So I'm going to just make a note of my GCF on the side. Okay, so I'm going to factor that out. All right, remember when you factor out a GCF, you write that GCF outside of parentheses. I'm left with 1w squared. You don't need that 1, but you could leave it there if you'd like. 12 divided by 4 is 3w, and then -40 divided by 4 is -10. All right, so my GCF is outside. Honestly, just ignore your GCF until you're done with the problem. Just keep going with the middle as you normally would. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply my a times c. That's going to be -10. And I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to -10 but add to the 3 in the middle. Okay, so multiply to -10 but add to 3. So again, I'm going to write those on the side, factors of -10. So I have -10, +1, -1, +10, -2, +5, -5, +2. Okay, there's only one combination that's going to give me a 3, a +3, and the combination that works is this one here. All right, -2 plus 5 is +3. So I'm going to put that here, -2, +5, and then now I'm ready to write my factors. Okay, so I'm going to use w because that's my variable. So w minus 2. My second one is w plus 5. Okay, and then don't forget about the 4 that was your GCF. You just copy that over. Okay, so there's the 4. All right, that's it. My a in red is 1. So if you divide these by 1, it doesn't change anything. So you actually don't have to do that. You can just leave it. But this here is my answer. This is factored completely. All right. All right, let's try number 23. Okay, so for this one here, you can go ahead and factor out a GCF again. So I'm going to go ahead and divide. I'm going to divide by 3. Let me stay consistent with the colors. So divide by 3. Okay, so I have 3m squared plus 36m squared plus 30m. And actually, I can't just divide by 3. I can also divide by an m. They all have an m in common. So my GCF is 3m. All right, so what I'm going to do is write my answer in parentheses, and I'm going to throw the 3m outside. That's my GCF. So for the first term, my 3's cancel. I have 3 m's in the numerator, 1 in the denominator, so I'm left with m squared. I could even put a 1 there just like I did before. 36 divided by 3 is 12, so I'm going to put plus 12. I'm left with 1m. And then for the last one, my m's cancel. 60 divided by 3 is 20. All right, so I'm left with this here. So what you want to do is then multiply your a and your c just like we did before. So 1 times 20 is 20. All right, and then put the middle number at the bottom. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 20 and 12. All right, so factors of 20 and 12. It came to me really quick, so I'm just going to write it down. 10 and 2 work because 10 times 2 is 20, and then 10 plus 2 is 12. So what I'm going to do is rewrite everything. So bring your 3m down, open up your parentheses. This time we're using m, that's our variable. So I'm going to have m plus 10 and then m plus 2, okay? And again, my a here is 1, so I don't have to divide. This is my answer, all right? I believe that's all that I assigned to you for homework up to number 24. You're doing the evens for homework. Make sure you show all of your work for full credit. I don't want to see answers. Last time on the homework, I got a lot of people just type in their answers. I am not accepting that. I'm going to return it back to you, okay? I need to see your work. There's no way you can do this without showing your work. So make sure you turn that in. Email me if you have any questions, type it into the document. And then, again, just let me know if you have any questions. Bye.